Life history strategies refer to the patterns of growth, reproduction, and survival that organisms exhibit over their lifetime. These strategies are shaped by evolutionary pressures and trade-offs that organisms face in response to their environments. Life history theory seeks to explain how natural selection influences the allocation of energy to different life stages and the types of reproductive strategies that maximize an organism's fitness in a given environment. 1. Key concepts in life history theory. Life history strategies are broadly categorized based on how organisms allocate their resources, e.g., energy, time, to different life functions such as growth, reproduction, and survival. These strategies are often viewed as existing along a continuum, with organisms exhibiting various combinations of characteristics. Trade-offs. Primary concept in life history strategies is the trade-off between different life functions, especially reproduction and survival. Resources are limited. An organism must allocate them in a way that maximizes its reproductive success while ensuring survival. Examples of trade-offs. Quantity versus quality of offspring. Organisms can either produce many offspring with less investment in each R strategy, or fewer offspring with more parental investment K strategy. Growth versus reproduction. Species must decide whether to allocate resources toward faster growth or earlier reproduction, which can have consequences on lifespan and fitness. B. Fitness maximization. The central aim of life history strategies is the maximization of fitness, the ability to pass on genes to future generations. This is achieved through various mechanisms such as producing a large number of offspring, ensuring the survival of offspring, or investing heavily in individual offspring to increase their chances of survival. See evolutionary pressures. Life research are shaped by the interplay between biotic, e.g., predation, competition, and abiotic factors, e.g., climate, food availability, that influence the success of different reproductive tactics in a given environment. 2. Types of life history strategies. AR selection, opportunistic strategy. Characteristics. R strategists are organisms that prioritize rapid reproduction and growth, producing a large number of offspring, but with little to no parental investment. These species are typically adapted to environments where resources are abundant but unpredictable or where mortality rates are high. Key traits. High reproductive rate. Many offspring are produced in a short amount of time. Early maturation. Reproduction occurs early in life. Short lifespan. Organisms generally have short lifespans. Low parental care. Offspring are often left to fend for themselves after birth. These species are typically characteristics. R strategists are organisms that prioritize rapid reproduction and growth, producing a large number of offspring, but with little to no parental investment. These species are typically adapted to environments where resources are abundant but unpredictable or where mortality rates are high. Key traits. High reproductive rate. Many offspring are produced in a short amount of time. Early maturation. Reproduction occurs early in life. Short lifespan. Organisms generally have short lifespans. Low parental care. Offspring are often left to fend for themselves after birth. High dispersal ability. These organisms are often capable of moving to new environments quickly. Examples. Many insects, e.g., fruit flies, mosquitoes, fish, and small mammals exhibit R strategy traits. Advantages. Rapid population growth when conditions are favorable. Into unstable or unpredictable environments where high mortality rates prevent long-term survival of any one individual. Disadvantages. Low survival rates for offspring due to lack of parental care. High mortality of individual organisms reduces overall fitness despite high reproductive output. BK selection, equilibrial strategy. Characteristics. K strategists are organisms that prioritize the survival of fewer offspring through high parental investment, ensuring that those offspring have a higher chance of reaching adulthood. These species are generally adapted to stable environments. These species are generally adapted to stable Characteristics. R strategists are organisms that prioritize rapid reproduction and growth, producing a large number of offspring, but with little to no parental investment. These species are typically adapted to environments where resources are abundant but unpredictable or where mortality rates are high. Key traits. High reproductive rate. Many offspring are produced in a short amount of time. Early maturation. Reproduction occurs early in life. Short lifespan. Organisms generally have short lifespans. Low parental care. Offspring are often left to fend for themselves after birth. High dispersal ability. These organisms are often capable of moving to new environments quickly. Examples. Many insects, e.g., fruit flies, mosquitoes, fish, and small mammals exhibit R strategy traits. Advantages. Rapid population growth when conditions are favorable. Adaptation to unstable or unpredictable environments where high mortality rates prevent long-term survival of any one individual. Disadvantages. Low survival rates for offspring due to lack of parental care. High mortality of individual organisms reduces overall fitness despite high reproductive output. BK selection, equilibrial strategy. Characteristics. K strategists are organisms that prioritize the survival of fewer offspring through high parental investment, ensuring that those offspring have a higher chance of reaching adulthood. These species are generally adapted to stable environments where competition for resources is high, and populations tend to remain near carrying capacity K. Key traits. Low reproductive rate. Fewer offspring are produced, but each is given significant care and resources. Late maturation. These organisms take longer to reach reproductive maturity. Long lifespan. K strategists tend to have longer lifespans. High parental care. Offspring are cared for extensively, often with social structures to support their growth and survival. Low dispersal ability. Organisms are often more specialized to stable environments. Examples. Elephants, humans, and other large mammals are classic K strategists. Advantages. Higher offspring survival due to parental investment and care. Adaptation to stable, resource-rich environments where competition is more intense and organisms must rely on quality rather than quantity. Disadvantages. Slow reproduction rates limit population growth during favorable conditions. Vulnerability to environmental changes, as fewer offspring are produced to cope with drastic changes. See bet hedging strategy. Bet hedging involves a strategy where organisms produce a mix of offspring, some of which are more suited to immediate reproduction, while others are more likely to survive through periods of environmental unpredictability. This strategy allows organisms to hedge their bets against uncertainty, ensuring that some offspring survive despite changing conditions. Key traits. A mix of early reproduction and long-term survival tactics. Some offspring may mature rapidly, while others take longer to reach maturity. They involve producing offspring with varied phenotypic traits that increase the likelihood of survival under changing environmental conditions. Examples: certain plant species that produce seeds with variable dormancy periods or fish species that produce offspring in different developmental stages are examples of bet hedging. Advantages. Ensure survival during periods of environmental fluctuation or unpredictability. Increases the chances that at least some offspring will survive through adverse conditions. Disadvantages. It may be inefficient in terms of resource allocation because not all offspring are fully optimized for reproduction or survival. 3. Trade-offs in life history strategies. The allocation of resources between various life history traits, such as growth, reproduction, and survival, often involves trade-offs. Below are some common examples of these trade-offs. A reproduction versus survival. In environments with high predation pressure or limited resources, organisms may trade off energy spent on reproduction for energy spent on survival. This is often observed in some helper's organisms, those that reproduce only once in their lifetime, where an organism allocates all its energy to a single reproductive event at the cost of its own survival. B. Current versus future reproduction. Organisms may invest heavily in reproduction early in life, current reproduction, at the cost of reducing their future reproductive potential. Conversely, investing in somatic growth and survival in youth may enhance reproductive success later in life, future reproduction. C. Quantity versus quality of offspring. Organisms invest in producing a large number of offspring with less care, R selection, while others may produce fewer offspring with more substantial parental investment, K selection. This trade-off is key to understanding the evolutionary pressures on reproductive strategies. 4. Life history strategies and evolution. Life history strategies are shaped by evolutionary pressures that favor certain strategies under specific environmental conditions. These strategies evolve because they represent the best balance between reproductive success and survival given the constraints of the environment. Adaptive radiation. In new or changing environments, species may diversify their life history strategies to exploit different ecological niches. For instance, on islands or after a mass extinction event, species may evolve different strategies that allow them to capitalize on new opportunities for growth and reproduction. Resource availability. In environments with abundant resources, organisms may adopt an R strategy, whereas in environments where resources are scarce or competition is intense, K strategies may be favored. 5. Previous year gave questions and answers. Q1. In the context of life history theory, which of the following is not a characteristic of K-selective species? A large number of offspring. B. High parental investment. C. Long lifespan. D. Slow population growth rate. Answer. A large number of offspring. Explanation. K-selected species typically produce fewer offspring but invest more in each one. They tend to have a longer lifespan and slower population growth rates. R-selected species, in contrast, produce many offspring but invest less in each. Q2. Which of the following is an example of an organism exhibiting a bet hedging life history strategy? A tree that produces many seeds, with some having short dormancy periods and others having long dormancy periods. B. A salmon that spawns only once and dies after reproduction. C. An elephant that produces one calf after a long gestation period. D. A rabbit that produces many offspring with little parental care. Answer. A tree that produces many seeds, with some having short dormancy periods and others having long dormancy periods. Explanation. This is an example of bet hedging, where the tree ensures that some seeds will survive even under unpredictable environmental conditions. Q3. Which life history strategy would you expect to be favored in an environment where resources are abundant and competition is low? A. R selection. B. K selection. C. Bet hedging. D. Both R selection and K selection. Answer. A. R selection. Explanation. In an environment with abundant resources and low competition, R selection would be favored because organisms can reproduce rapidly and produce many offspring with less investment in each. Conclusion. Life history strategies are a fundamental aspect of evolutionary biology, explaining how organisms allocate resources to maximize reproductive success in different environments. These strategies are shaped by evolutionary trade-offs between survival, growth, and reproduction. The R-K selection continuum and bet hedging strategies provide a framework for understanding how species adapt to their ecological contexts, and life history theory continues to be a key area of research in both ecology and evolutionary biology. You said. Allocation of resources. ChatGPT said. ChatGPT. Allocation of resources in life history strategies. In evolutionary biology, the allocation of resources refers to how organisms divide their limited energy and resources among various life functions such as growth, reproduction, and survival. This process is critical because it dictates the life history strategies organisms adopt, and these strategies are shaped by natural selection. Trade-offs in resource allocation determine the reproductive success, fitness, survival of an organism in its particular environment. 1. Key concepts in resource allocation trade-offs. Organisms face trade-offs when allocating resources between competing life history traits. These trade-offs reflect the fact that energy is limited, and resources must be shared between competing demands like growth, reproduction, and survival. The way organisms distribute their energy influences their evolutionary fitness. Example trade-offs. Growth versus reproduction. Organisms can either allocate resources to growth and building reserves, which may improve survival chances, or focus on reproduction, which maximizes the number of offspring produced. Curve versus future reproduction. Some organisms invest energy into early reproduction, sacrificing future reproductive opportunities, while others invest more in survival and delay reproduction until later. Quality versus quantity of offspring. Some organisms produce many offspring with little parental care, while others produce fewer offspring but provide extensive care to ensure their survival. B. The life history continuum. The allocation of resources in organisms is often viewed along a continuum between two extremes. R selection. Opportunistic strategy. Organisms allocate resources toward rapid reproduction, producing many offspring with little parental investment. This strategy is typical in unpredictable or disturbed environments where competition is low. K-selection equilibrial strategy. Organisms allocate resources toward maintaining their survival and producing fewer offspring with greater parental investment. This strategy is found in stable environments where competition for resources is high. See the principle of allocation. The principle of allocation is a fundamental concept that states that an organism has limited energy, and how it divides that energy between competing functions will affect its fitness. An increase in energy devoted to one function, e.g., reproduction, often means less energy is available for other functions, e.g., growth or defense. 2. Factors influencing resource allocation. Several factors influence how organisms allocate their resources, including environmental conditions. Resource availability. In environments with abundant resources, organisms may allocate more energy toward reproduction, resulting in high reproductive output. In resource-scarce environments, organisms may prioritize survival and growth, leading to fewer but resource availability. In environments with abundant resources, organisms may allocate more energy toward reproduction, resulting in high reproductive output. In resource-scarce environments, organisms may prioritize survival and growth, leading to fewer but more well-cared-for offspring. Predation pressure. High predation pressure may lead to increased investment in survival, such as larger body size or defensive traits, while reducing energy allocated to reproduction. Climate conditions. Harsh climates may select for strategies that emphasize survival over reproduction, such as longer lifespan and slower development. B. Life stages. Different life stages, e.g., juvenile, adult, reproductive, often require different resource allocations. For instance, juvenile stages may prioritize growth to reach sexual maturity, while adults may allocate resources to reproduction and maintaining bodily functions. See genetic factors. Genetic predisposition can influence how organisms respond to environmental challenges and how they allocate resources. Some species may be genetically inclined to invest more in reproduction, while others may focus on growth or defense. 3. Models of resource allocation. Several theoretical models have been proposed to understand the mechanisms and strategies behind resource allocation. Some prominent models include the allocation model by Metcalfe. This model suggests that organisms balance the costs and benefits of different life history traits in relation to their energy budget. According to Metcalfe's model, organisms optimize their resource allocation by choosing a strategy that maximizes fitness, taking into account the expected reproductive success and survival chances. B. The resource allocation hypothesis, RAH. According to this hypothesis, organisms divide their available resources among various functions such as growth, reproduction, and maintenance. The allocation is shaped by the cost of each function and the benefit it provides to fitness. See the trade-off model, R-K continuum. The trade-off model posits that organisms invest in either quantity, R strategy, or quality, K strategy, of offspring, depending on the environmental pressures they face. In unpredictable environments, high reproductive output, R selection, maximizes fitness, while in stable environments, long-term survival and investment in offspring quality, K selection, are favored. 4. Allocation and different life history strategies. AR selection, opportunistic strategy. Resource allocation. In R-selected species, the focus is on reproduction rather than survival. These species allocate a significant portion of their resources to producing a large number of offspring, with little investment in individual offspring care. This strategy is typical in environments that are unstable or unpredictable. Examples: insects, small rodents, and some amphibians. Key traits: high reproductive rates, little or no parental investment, high mortality rates for offspring, short lifespan. BK selection, equilibrial strategy. Resource allocation. K-selected species invest heavily in survival and parental care. These species produce fewer offspring but invest more resources in nurturing and protecting them. This strategy is favored in stable, competitive environments where resources are limited. Examples: elephants, whales, and humans. Key traits: fewer offspring, high parental care and investment, longer lifespan. Slow growth and late reproduction. See bet hedging strategy. In environments with high uncertainty or fluctuating conditions, some species adopt a bet hedging strategy, where they allocate resources to produce offspring with varying characteristics, e.g., different growth rates or dormancy periods, to increase the chances of survival in unpredictable environments. 5. Resource allocation and evolution. Resource allocation is a dynamic process influenced by both environmental factors and evolutionary pressures. Over time, natural selection favors organisms whose allocation strategies maximize their fitness in specific environments. The evolution of resource allocation strategies reflects adaptive responses to ecological pressures. Evolution of reproductive strategies. Natural selection often favors strategies that balance reproduction and survival. For instance, in environments where mortality rates are high, organisms may evolve to reproduce early and produce many offspring. In stable environments with high competition, organisms may evolve to reproduce later, with fewer but more viable offspring. B. Plasticity and resource allocation. Some species exhibit phenotypic plasticity, meaning they can adjust their resource allocation strategies based on environmental conditions. For example, an organism may allocate more resources to growth in resource-abundant years and more to reproduction during resource-scarce years. 6. Previous year gave questions and answers. Q1. Which of the following statements is true regarding the allocation of resources in life history theory? A. An organism's resources can be allocated solely to growth. B. There are no trade-offs in how resources are allocated to reproduction and survival. C. The allocation of resources in an organism's life history can affect its fitness. D. Organisms always allocate equal resources to growth and reproduction. Answer: C. The allocation of resources in an organism's life history can affect its fitness. Explanation: the allocation of resources influences an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Trade-offs must occur because resources are limited, and how resources are allocated to growth, reproduction, and survival directly affects fitness. Q2. In an environment with abundant resources and low competition, which life history strategy is most likely to be adopted by a species? A. K selection. B. R selection. C. Bet hedging. D. Both R and K selection. Answer: B. R selection. Explanation: R selection is favored in environments where resources are abundant and competition is low. These conditions support the rapid reproduction and high offspring numbers typical of R strategists. Q3. Which of the following would not be a consequence of a species allocating more energy to reproduction rather than survival? A. Increased reproductive output. B. Shorter lifespan. C. Higher survival rates of offspring. D. Reduced investment in somatic maintenance. Answer: C. Higher survival rates of offspring. Explanation: allocating more energy to reproduction often comes at the cost of reduced parental care and investment, which typically results in lower survival rates of offspring. The trade-off between reproduction and survival means that offspring survival is often compromised. Conclusion. The allocation of resources is central to understanding life history strategies in ecology and evolution. It is a dynamic process that reflects an organism's adaptations to its environment, balancing reproduction, survival, and growth. Resource allocation strategies, from R selection to K selection, influence how organisms evolve and adapt to ecological challenges. Understanding these strategies helps explain the diversity of life forms and their evolutionary success in various environments. You said, trade-offs, ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Trade-offs in life history strategies. In evolutionary biology, trade-offs refer to the concept that organisms face constraints on how they can allocate their limited resources, such as energy, time, and nutrients, among competing life functions such as growth, reproduction, and survival. These trade-offs result because resources are finite, meaning that an increase in one life history trait often comes at the expense of others. The idea of trade-offs is central to understanding life history strategies, which describe how organisms reproduce, grow, and survive under various environmental conditions. 1. The concept of trade-offs. The trade-off hypothesis suggests that organisms are constrained in how they allocate their resources to different life history functions. This constraint leads to a balance between functions such as reproduction, the production of offspring; growth, the increase in body size or fitness; survival, the maintenance of the organism's body to ensure continued existence. For example, allocating more resources to reproduction, e.g., producing many offspring, might reduce the resources available for growth and maintenance, which could reduce the organism's lifespan. Conversely, allocating more resources to survival or growth might reduce the energy available for reproduction. 2. Types of life history trade-offs. There are several key types of trade-offs that organisms face in the context of evolution and resource allocation. A reproduction versus survival. One of the most well-known trade-offs is between reproduction and survival. Organisms that invest heavily in reproduction often experience lower survival rates because they invest fewer resources in maintaining their bodies. This is especially true in species that produce many offspring with little parental care. Example, in some fish species, such as salmon, the energy invested in reproducing in one large batch results in a trade-off between high reproductive output and a relatively short lifespan. After spawning, many of these fish die. B. Reproduction versus growth. Growth and reproduction are also in competition for resources. If an organism focuses more on rapid growth to reach sexual maturity quickly, it may allocate fewer resources to reproduction early on. Alternatively, some organisms grow slowly but reproduce more efficiently once they reach larger sizes, investing more in offspring quality rather than quantity. Example, some species of trees may allocate more energy to producing seeds reproduction and less to expanding their branches and leaves growth. This can limit their ability to capture sunlight and grow more efficiently, but it maximizes their reproductive success. C. Quality versus quantity of offspring. This trade-off involves a balance between producing many offspring with low parental investment or fewer offspring with high parental care. The number of offspring produced quantity may be inversely related to the investment in each individual offspring's survival quality. Example, in many species of birds, such as the European kestrel, there is a trade-off between the number of eggs laid and the care given to each chick. Birds that lay larger clutches of eggs typically invest less time in each chick, while those that produce fewer offspring invest more time in each one, enhancing their survival chances. D. Early versus late reproduction. Organisms may also face a trade-off between reproducing early in life or delaying reproduction to invest more in growth or survival. Early reproduction allows organisms to produce offspring quickly, while delaying reproduction can allow them to grow larger, be more competitive, or gain experience, potentially increasing their lifetime reproductive success. Example, in some species, like certain rodents, early reproduction may shorten the lifespan, but in environments with high mortality rates, early reproduction may be beneficial to maximize lifetime reproductive success. E. Parental investment versus offspring number. The amount of parental care invested in offspring is another key trade-off. Some species invest heavily in a small number of offspring, providing significant parental care, e.g., mammals, while others produce large numbers of offspring with minimal care, e.g., many fish and amphibians. The trade-off is that higher investment in offspring increases survival but reduces the number of offspring that can be produced. Example, in elephants, which invest a lot of energy in caring for each calf, only a few offspring are born during a lifetime. In contrast, species like frogs produce hundreds of eggs but offer no parental care. 3. Ecological and evolutionary context of trade-offs. Trade-offs in resource allocation arise because of the limited availability of resources and the need for organisms to prioritize certain traits that maximize their fitness in specific environments. The evolution of these trade-offs is shaped by environmental conditions, predation pressures, and competition for resources. Environmental factors. Unpredictable environments. In harsh or fluctuating environments, R selection strategies, characterized by high reproductive output and low parental care, often prevail. This is because the unpredictable conditions favor producing many offspring quickly to hedge bets on survival. Stable environments. In more predictable environments, K selection strategies may be favored. These strategies emphasize slower growth, fewer offspring, and greater parental investment in offspring survival. B. Fitness maximization. Trade-offs ultimately serve to maximize evolutionary fitness. Fitness is determined by an organism's ability to survive, reproduce, and pass on its genes. Organisms that strike the optimal balance in their trade-offs for a particular environment are more likely to pass on their genes to the next generation. 4. Life history strategies in the R-K continuum. The R-K selection theory provides a framework for understanding trade-offs in the context of reproductive strategies. R selection, opportunistic strategy. Organisms under R selection are typically those in unstable or unpredictable environments. They prioritize reproduction and produce many offspring, with little investment in individual offspring survival. These organisms exhibit fast growth, early sexual maturity, and short lifespans. Examples: many insects, bacteria, and annual plants. K selection, equilibrial strategy. Organisms under K selection, in contrast, are typically found in stable environments where competition for resources is high. They produce fewer offspring but invest heavily in each one, maximizing survival chances. These organisms tend to have long lifespans, slow growth, and delayed reproduction. Examples: large mammals, such as elephants and humans. 5. The trade-off model, evolutionary implications. Trade-offs are an essential part of life history evolution. Natural selection favors strategies that maximize reproductive success in specific environmental contexts. Evolution can be seen as an ongoing process of optimization of these trade-offs. The balance between various traits, such as the number of offspring, the investment in each offspring, survival, and growth, directly impacts evolutionary fitness. Evolutionary trade-off modeling. Mathematical models of trade-offs often assume that there are genetic constraints on the amount of resources that can be allocated to different functions. These models attempt to predict optimal resource allocation strategies under different environmental pressures and evolutionary scenarios. B. Evolution of life history traits. Trade-offs lead to the evolution of life history traits such as reproductive timing, size of offspring, and degree of parental care. Organisms evolve these traits as they adapt to their ecological niches and the specific trade-offs they face in resource allocation. 6. Previous year gave questions and answers on trade-offs. Q1. The trade-off between reproduction and survival is best explained by which of the following? A. Organisms that reproduce early in life often have longer lifespans. B. High reproductive investment decreases the energy available for survival. C. Reproductive output increases with parental care. D. Resources are unlimited, allowing organisms to grow and reproduce without trade-offs. Answer. B. High reproductive investment decreases the energy available for survival. Explanation. Organisms that invest heavily in reproduction, e.g., producing many offspring, often have less energy available for maintenance and survival, which can shorten their lifespan. Q2. Which of the following best describes a K-selected species? A. High reproductive output with little parental care. B. Short lifespan and rapid growth. C. Few offspring with extensive parental care. D. Early reproduction and low investment in survival. Answer. C. Few offspring with extensive parental care. Explanation. K-selected species, like elephants and humans, produce fewer offspring and invest significant resources in their care, leading to higher survival rates and longer lifespans. Q3. In which of the following scenarios would you expect to see an evolutionary trade-off between the number of offspring and the quality of parental care? A. A species producing many small offspring with little parental care. B. A species producing few large offspring with high parental care. C. A species with a long lifespan and high growth rate. D. A species that invests equally in offspring quantity and quality. Answer. B. A species producing few large offspring with high parental care. Explanation. In species where offspring are fewer but receive more parental care, the trade-off is between quantity, number of offspring, and quality, investment per offspring. Conclusion. Trade-offs in life history strategies are fundamental to understanding how organisms allocate resources among various life functions. These trade-offs are shaped by natural selection and influence the evolution of traits related to growth, reproduction, and survival. The balance between competing demands determines an organism's overall fitness and evolutionary success in different environments. Understanding these trade-offs provides insights into the adaptive strategies organisms use to thrive in their ecological niches. You said, RK selection. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. RK selection theory. The RK selection theory describes two different reproductive strategies that organisms may adopt, based on environmental conditions and the available resources. This theory, proposed by Robert MacArthur and Edward O. Wilson in the early 1960s, categorizes organisms into two main groups, R-selected species and K-selected species. These strategies reflect different trade-offs in the allocation of resources towards reproduction and survival. 1. Basic concept. R-selection. Organisms that adopt an R-selected strategy thrive in unstable or unpredictable environments, where the population size may fluctuate widely due to external factors e.g., weather, food availability. These organisms tend to maximize reproductive output to compensate for high mortality rates. K-selection. Organisms that adopt a K-selected strategy are found in stable environments where the carrying capacity K of the habitat is more predictable, and competition for resources is intense. These species invest more in quality and survival, with fewer offspring and higher parental care. 2. Characteristics of R-selected species. R-selected species are characterized by life history traits that allow them to reproduce rapidly and exploit temporary or unstable environments. These organisms usually exhibit the following traits. A high reproductive output. R-selected species produce many offspring in a single reproductive event. The offspring are often small and require little to no parental care. These species maximize their reproductive success by producing large numbers of offspring to hedge against high mortality rates. B. Early reproductive age. R-selected species tend to reach sexual maturity quickly, which allows them to reproduce at a young age. C. Short lifespan. These organisms typically have shorter lifespans, as their main focus is on reproduction rather than long-term survival. D. Minimal parental care. There is generally little or no parental care given to the offspring, as the strategy is to produce many offspring with the assumption that only a few will survive. E. Fast growth rate. R-selected species exhibit rapid growth and reproduction, especially when resources are abundant. Examples of R-selected species. Many insects e.g., fruit flies, mosquitoes, annual plants. Rodents in unpredictable environments. Fish species with high fecundity, like salmon, which spawn once and die 3. Characteristics of K-selected species. K-selected species are adapted to environments where resources are more predictable and competition is the primary selective pressure. They invest in fewer offspring, focusing on maximizing survival and ensuring that the offspring reach maturity. Key characteristics include a low reproductive output. K-selected species produce fewer offspring per reproductive event. The offspring are typically larger and more developed at birth. These species invest significant energy in each offspring to ensure higher survival rates. B. Late reproductive age. These species reach sexual maturity later in life compared to R-selected species. C. Long lifespan. K-selected species tend to have longer lifespans, allowing them more opportunities for reproduction over their lifetime. D. High parental investment. There is substantial parental care, with the parents providing protection, food, and other resources to increase the survival chances of the offspring. E. Slow growth rate. These organisms grow slowly, especially early in life, as they invest resources in survival and reaching sexual maturity. Examples of K-selected species. Humans. Elephants, whales. Large trees e.g., oaks. 4. RK selection and environmental factors. The RK selection continuum is not a rigid dichotomy but rather a spectrum. Organisms may exhibit characteristics of both strategies depending on their specific environmental context. The environment plays a significant role in shaping whether a species adopts an RK-selected strategy. Unstable environments. R-selection. In environments that are unpredictable or subject to disturbances e.g., fires, floods, R-selected species tend to thrive. These species are adapted to capitalize on short-lived opportunities, where rapid reproduction is key to their success. B. Stable environments. K-selection. In environments where resources are stable and competition is more intense, K-selected species tend to dominate. These species maximize their fitness by ensuring that their offspring survive and reproduce, even if they produce fewer offspring. 5. RK selection is a continuum. Though The R selection theory provides a useful framework for understanding reproductive strategies. It's important to note that many species don't fall neatly into either category. The continuum model suggests that organisms can exhibit a combination of R and K characteristics, depending on various factors like the environment, habitat stability, and resource availability. For example, species with mixed strategies. Some species may exhibit rapid reproduction, R-like, when resources are abundant but shift to more parental investment, K-like, when the environment becomes more competitive. 6. Evolutionary and ecological significance. R-K selection provides insight into how species adapt to their environments through evolutionary strategies. These strategies affect the way populations grow, how they respond to environmental changes, and how they allocate resources to reproductive and survival strategies. Trade-offs in resource allocation. R-K selection theory highlights the evolutionary trade-offs that species face. There is a constant balance between the number of offspring, the amount of parental care, and the organism's survival. The optimal strategy is determined by the ecological context in which a species exists. B. Influence of competition and environmental change. The relative abundance of R and K selected species can change based on environmental changes. For example, a change in climate or resource availability may favor one strategy over the other, shifting community structures over time. 7. Previous year gave questions and answers on R-K selection. Q1. Which of the following is most likely to be a characteristic of an R-selected species? A. Large offspring with high parental care. B. Few offspring with prolonged parental investment. C. Many offspring with little to no parental care. D. Slow growth rate and delayed reproduction. Answer. C. Many offspring with little to no parental care. Explanation. R-selected species produce many offspring, typically with little parental investment, as their strategy focuses on quantity over quality, assuming that only a few offspring will survive. Q2. Which of the following organisms is most likely to exhibit K selection? A rabbit that reproduces frequently and has many offspring. B. An oak tree that produces a few seeds but invests heavily in their growth and survival. C. A bacterium that divides rapidly to exploit available resources. D. A fish that spawns once in a lifetime and then dies. Answer. B. An oak tree that produces a few seeds but invests heavily in their growth and survival. Explanation. K-selected species, like oak trees, produce fewer offspring with a high investment in their care, aiming to maximize the survival and reproductive success of each. Q3. Which of the following best describes a species that exhibits R-selection? A. Produces a few offspring with high parental investment. B. Reaches sexual maturity early and produces many offspring. C. Reproduces slowly and lives for many years. D. Produces few offspring and provides extended parental care. Answer. B. Reaches sexual maturity early and produces many offspring. Explanation. R-selected species are characterized by early reproduction and high reproductive output, often in environments where survival is uncertain, so they maximize their chances of producing offspring. Conclusion. The R-K selection theory provides a framework for understanding the diversity of reproductive strategies in the natural world. Organisms adapt to their environments by choosing strategies that maximize their evolutionary fitness, either through rapid reproduction with minimal care, R-selection, or by producing fewer offspring with more investment in their survival, K-selection. These strategies are shaped by ecological pressures and are crucial for understanding population dynamics, species interactions, and evolutionary processes. You said, Similparity ChatGPT said, ChatGPT Similparity. Similparity is a reproductive strategy where an organism reproduces only once during its lifetime, typically producing a large number of offspring in a single reproductive event. This strategy is often observed in species that experience high adult mortality rates or in environments where the conditions for reproduction are short-lived or highly variable. Similparity contrasts with heteroparity, in which organisms reproduce multiple times throughout their lives. While heteroparous species invest in fewer offspring over time with a focus on survival and parental care, similparous species allocate all their reproductive resources to a single, often massive reproductive effort. 1. Key characteristics of similparity: a one-time reproduction. The hallmark of similparity is that the organism reproduces only once in its lifetime, after which it typically dies. This strategy often involves a large expenditure of energy in producing a large number of offspring in a single reproductive event. B. High reproductive effort. Similparous species invest the majority of their energy and resources into reproduction. This results in a high reproductive effort that leads to the production of a large number of offspring, often in a single, synchronized event. See high mortality after reproduction. After reproduction, most similparous species die, either because of the physical toll of reproduction or due to a lack of resources for long-term survival. In some species, this process is linked to an innate biological program, e.g., a rapid aging process after reproduction. D. Low parental investment. In most cases, similparous organisms do not invest much in parental care. They produce large numbers of offspring, but without significant investment in each one. The expectation is that the sheer number of offspring increases the likelihood that some will survive to maturity. E. Life history strategy. Similparity is often seen as a strategy to take advantage of short-term environmental opportunities, e.g., abundant food or favorable weather. The strategy maximizes reproductive output in these favorable periods, compensating for high adult mortality rates and unpredictability in environmental conditions. 2. Examples of similparous organisms. A Pacific salmon, genus Oncorhynchus. Reproduction. Pacific salmon are classic examples of similparous species. After migrating from the ocean to their natal rivers, they spawn once, often in large numbers, and then die shortly afterward. Their reproductive effort is vast. Females can produce tens of thousands of eggs, which are fertilized externally by the males. Life cycle. The energy expended in the spawning process is so great that adult salmon typically die after reproducing. This large reproductive effort is essential to their life cycle, ensuring that at least some offspring survive despite the environmental challenges. B. Agave plants. Reproduction. Many species of agave, including Agave americana, exhibit similparity. These plants invest many years into growing large before flowering. They flower once, producing a large inflorescence that can contain millions of seeds. Life cycle. After flowering, the plant typically dies, having completed its reproductive cycle. The death of the plant is often tied to its energy being entirely directed toward the reproductive event. See certain insects, e.g., mayflies. Reproduction. Many species of mayflies, which have short adult lifespans, reproduce only once. Their life cycle is designed to maximize the reproductive output in a short period. Mayflies typically have a very brief adult phase, often lasting just a few hours or days, during which they mate and lay eggs. Life cycle. After mating, adults die, having expended all their energy into reproduction. The larva nymphs live much longer, depending on the species. D. Annual plants, e.g., some species of bamboo. Reproduction. Certain species of bamboo are similparous, flowering en masse after many years. Some species flower only once every 30 to 50 years. During this single flowering event, they produce vast quantities of seeds, after which the entire population of plants dies off. Life cycle. The flowering event is synchronized across entire regions or populations, ensuring that the seeds have a chance to take root in the environment. This strategy benefits from a sudden, massive release of seeds in favorable conditions, increasing the odds that some will survive. 3. Advantages of Simulparity. A maximizing reproductive output. By investing all of their energy into one reproductive event, Simulparous organisms can produce large numbers of offspring. This increases the likelihood that at least some will survive, even if environmental conditions are harsh. B. Exploiting short-term environmental opportunities. Simulparity is particularly advantageous in environments where conditions are temporary or unpredictable. For instance, an organism might only have one opportunity to reproduce during a period of abundance, e.g., when food is plentiful or when environmental conditions are favorable. By timing reproduction to coincide with these brief opportunities, Simulparous species can ensure their offspring's survival. C. Reduced risk of predation and competition. In some cases, Simulparous species reduce the time they are exposed to predation or competition by synchronizing reproduction. In species like Pacific salmon, the sheer number of offspring produced at once may overwhelm predators, ensuring that at least some young survive. 4. Disadvantages of Simulparity. A high risk of mortality. One of the major risks of Simulparity is the complete reliance on a single reproductive event. If environmental conditions during the time are unfavorable, e.g., drought, predation, the species could face reproductive failure, with no opportunities to try again in the future. B. Lack of parental investment. Simulparous species generally provide minimal to no parental care, which means that offspring must rely on their own survival strategies, e.g., rapid development, high numbers to make it to maturity. C. Vulnerability to environmental changes. Because Simulparous species tend to invest everything into a single reproductive cycle, they are particularly vulnerable to environmental changes. If conditions change, e.g., habitat destruction, climate shifts, the reproductive success of Simulparous organisms can be severely affected. 5. Simulparity versus Heteroparity. While Simulparity involves a single reproductive event, Heteroparity involves multiple reproductive events over an organism's lifetime. In Heteroparous species, reproduction is spaced out over time, with organisms producing fewer offspring per event but investing in their survival and care. Simulparity, one-time reproduction, high reproductive effort, high offspring numbers, no parental care, and death after reproduction. Heteroparity, multiple reproductive events, lower reproductive effort per event, fewer offspring, and parental care. Both strategies are shaped by the environment and ecological pressures. Simulparity is often observed in organisms living in unpredictable environments, where a large reproductive output in a single event increases the chances of species survival. 6. Previous year gave questions and answers on Simulparity. Q1. Which of the following is an example of a Simulparous organism? A. Humans. B. Salmon. C. Elephants. D. Birds. Answer. B. Salmon. Explanation. Salmon are classic examples of Simulparous species. They reproduce only once in their lifetime, migrating to freshwater rivers to spawn, and die shortly after. Q2. Which of the following reproductive strategies is characterized by the production of a large number of offspring in a single reproductive event, after which the organism typically dies? A. Heteroparity. B. Simulparity. C. Parental care. D. Sexual reproduction. Answer. B. Simulparity. Explanation. Simulparity is defined by the production of many offspring in a single reproductive event, after which the organism usually dies. Conclusion. Simulparity is an intriguing and distinct reproductive strategy that allows organisms to take advantage of short-lived environmental opportunities. While it increases the chances of offspring survival during favorable conditions, it also comes with risks, including the inability to reproduce again and the lack of parental care. Organisms that follow this strategy invest heavily in a single reproductive event, producing numerous offspring but with little direct investment in their care after birth. The strategy is well suited to environments that are unpredictable or subject to rapid changes. You said. Heteroparity. ChatGPT said. ChatGPT. Heteroparity. Heteroparity is a reproductive strategy in which an organism reproduces multiple times during its lifetime. Unlike Simulparity, where reproduction occurs only once, Heteroparous species produce offspring in several distinct reproductive events spread across their lifespan. This strategy is characterized by fewer offspring per reproductive event, but the organisms have repeated opportunities to reproduce, potentially leading to a greater cumulative reproductive success over time. Heteroparous species tend to invest more in the survival and well-being of their offspring compared to Simulparous species, often engaging in parental care to ensure higher survival rates. 1. Key characteristics of Heteroparity and multiple reproductive events. Heteroparous organisms reproduce multiple times throughout their lives, which allows them to spread out the risk of reproductive failure. Each reproductive event produces fewer offspring compared to Simulparous species, but the organism has several opportunities to successfully reproduce. B. Parental care. Many Heteroparous species invest more energy and resources into each offspring compared to Simulparous species. This often involves parental care, such as guarding eggs or providing nourishment, which increases the chances of offspring survival. C. Lower reproductive output per event. Each reproductive event typically produces fewer offspring compared to Simulparous species, as the organism is allocating resources toward survival and future reproductive opportunities. This strategy can help ensure long-term survival and reduce the chances of overburdening the environment with too many offspring at once. D. Increased survival and longevity. Heteroparous species often live longer than Simulparous ones, as their energy is not solely spent on a single reproductive event. Their longer lifespan provides multiple opportunities to produce offspring, and they may also develop more complex survival strategies. 2. Examples of Heteroparous organisms. A. Humans. Homo sapiens. Reproduction. Humans are a classic example of Heteroparous organisms. Reproduction occurs at several intervals throughout their lives, often with long intervals between each reproductive event, e.g., childbirth. Human offspring are cared for over a long period, and parents typically invest considerable time and resources into raising their young. Life cycle. Humans reproduce multiple times throughout their lifespan, with the ability to raise offspring to maturity, which increases the chances of survival for the next generation. B. Elephants. Family. Elephantidae. Reproduction. Elephants are Heteroparous mammals that reproduce every few years. Elephants invest heavily in parental care, especially maternal care, as calves are dependent on their mothers for nourishment and protection for several years. Life cycle. The female elephant has a long reproductive lifespan and can reproduce multiple times, typically giving birth to one calf every few years. The slow reproductive rate is balanced by the high survival rate of each offspring due to intensive care. C. Birds. Various species. Reproduction. Many bird species are Heteroparous. They reproduce in multiple breeding seasons throughout their lives. Birds often invest in the care of their young, providing food and protection until the chicks are mature enough to survive independently. Life cycle. Idiroperous birds, like sparrows, robins, and pigeons, have multiple breeding seasons in which they produce one or more offspring. This strategy increases their reproductive success across their lifetime. D trees, e.g., oak trees. Reproduction. Many trees, including oak trees, Quercus species, are idiroperous. They produce seeds over many years, with each reproductive event resulting in a relatively small number of seeds compared to some helperous species like bamboo. Life cycle. Oak trees, for example, produce acorns throughout their life, with mature trees continuing to reproduce annually. The seeds may not all germinate in the same season, and the tree's longevity increases the chance that some offspring will survive in varied environmental conditions. 3. Advantages of idiroparity. A risk spreading. By reproducing multiple times, idiroperous species reduce the risk of complete reproductive failure. If one reproductive event does not produce viable offspring due to environmental factors, predation, etc., they can try again in subsequent years or seasons. B. Parental investment. Idiroperous species tend to invest more in each offspring, improving their chances of survival. For example, in many mammals and birds, parents invest time and resources in nurturing and protecting their young, which increases the likelihood that their offspring will reach maturity. C. Environmental adaptability. Idiroperous species are more likely to survive in variable or unpredictable environments. If conditions are unfavorable during one reproductive season, the species can wait for better conditions in the next season to reproduce. D. Increased longevity. Idiroperous organisms often have longer lifespans than some helperous species, as their reproductive cycles are spread over a longer period. This longer lifespan allows them to continuously adapt to changing environments. 4. Disadvantages of idiroparity. A lower reproductive output per event. Each reproductive event typically results in fewer offspring compared to some helperous species. This reduces the chances of producing a large number of offspring at once, which could be beneficial in environments with high mortality rates. B. Increased parental investment. The need for parental care in some species can be costly in terms of time, energy, and resources. This increases the chance of reduced reproductive output or survival rates for other offspring. C. Competition. Multiple reproductive events mean that an idiroperous organism faces continued competition for resources. If resources are limited, there may be insufficient food, nesting sites, or shelter to ensure that offspring survive, especially in dense populations. 5. Idiroparity versus simulparity. While simulparity involves a single, all-out reproductive effort, idiroparity involves multiple, smaller reproductive events. The two strategies offer different advantages and are shaped by ecological and environmental pressures. Simulparity. One reproductive event, high reproductive output, no parental care, and death after reproduction. Idiroparity. Multiple reproductive events, fewer offspring per event, significant parental investment, and potential for increased survival over time. Idiroperous organisms often have the advantage in environments that are relatively stable and predictable, as they can reproduce several times, ensuring a steady supply of offspring over the years. 6. Previous year gate questions and answers on idiroparity. Q1. Which of the following strategies is associated with the production of fewer offspring over multiple reproductive events throughout an organism's lifetime? A. Simulparity. B. Idiroparity. C. Asexual reproduction. D. Clonal reproduction. Answer. B. Idiroparity. Explanation. Idiroparity is characterized by multiple reproductive events throughout an organism's life, where fewer offspring are produced at each event, and the organism typically invests more in each offspring. Q2. Which of the following is a characteristic of idiroperous species? A. High reproductive output in a single event. B. No parental care. C. Reproduction multiple times over the organism's lifetime. D. Organisms die after reproduction. Answer. C. Reproduction multiple times over the organism's lifetime. Explanation. Idiroperous species reproduce several times during their lifespan, as opposed to some helperous species that reproduce only once and then die. Q3. In which of the following situations is idiroparity likely to be favored over simulparity? A. Environments with extreme variability and unpredictability. B. Environments with short-lived and abundant resources. C. Species with low survival rates in early stages. D. Species living in very stable and predictable environments. Answer. D. Species living in very stable and predictable environments. Explanation. Idiroparity is favored in stable environments where organisms have multiple opportunities to reproduce over time. Simulparity, on the other hand, is advantageous in unpredictable environments where a single, large reproductive effort is beneficial. Conclusion. Idiroparity is a highly adaptable reproductive strategy that provides organisms with the flexibility to reproduce multiple times during their lifetime. By producing fewer offspring per event but with the ability to try again in the future, idiroperous species increase their chances of reproductive success in relatively stable or predictable environments. This strategy offers significant advantages in terms of risk spreading and parental investment, especially in species with high survival rates of offspring. You said, interactions, ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Interactions in ecology. Ecological interactions refer to the relationships between organisms in an ecosystem. These interactions can be categorized into several types based on how individuals or species interact with each other and with their environment. These relationships can affect the survival, reproduction, and fitness of the organisms involved. Understanding ecological interactions is essential for studying ecosystem dynamics, population regulation, and community structure. 1. Types of ecological interactions. There are several fundamental types of interactions between organisms in an ecosystem, each of which has varying effects on the fitness of the individuals involved. These interactions can be categorized as positive, negative, or neutral depending on how they influence the participating species. A. Competition. Definition. Competition occurs when two or more species or individuals vie for the same limited resources, such as food, shelter, or mates. This interaction is typically negative for both species involved because the resources they depend on are limited, and their presence reduces the availability for others. Types of competition. Interspecific competition. Competition between individuals of the same species. Interspecific competition. Competition between individuals of different species. Effect on species. Both species typically experience a decrease in fitness, survival, growth, or reproduction due to the scarcity of resources. Example. Interspecific. Trees of the same species compete for sunlight, water, and nutrients. Interspecific. Lions and hyenas in the African savanna may compete for similar prey. B. Predation. Definition. Predation is an interaction where one organism, the predator, kills and eats another organism, the prey. Predation has positive effects on the predator but negative effects on the prey. Effect on species. Predator gains food, energy, and nutrients, leading to increased fitness. Prey suffers death or injury, reducing its fitness. Example. A wolf predator hunts and kills a deer prey for food. Adaptations. Predator adaptations may include speed, camouflage, and hunting strategies. Prey. Adaptations may include warning coloration, camouflage, or defensive mechanisms like venom or spines. See Herbivora. Definition. Herbivora is an interaction where an herbivore feeds on plants. This interaction generally harms the plant but benefits the herbivore. Effect on species. Herbivore gains nutrients and energy from consuming plant material. Plant experiences a loss of biomass and energy, which may negatively impact its growth and reproduction. Example. A caterpillar feeding on the leaves of a plant is a classic example of herbivora. Adaptations. Plants may evolve physical defenses, e.g., thorns, or chemical defenses, e.g., toxins, to reduce herbivora. Mutualism. Definition. Mutualism is a type of interaction where both species benefit from the relationship. It is a positive interaction for both organisms involved. Effect on species. Both species gain benefits that improve their survival, reproduction, or growth. Example. Pollination. Bees and flowering plants engage in mutualism. Bees obtain nectar from flowers' food while the plants benefit from the transfer of pollen, aiding in fertilization. Mycorrhizae. Fungi form mutualistic relationships with plant roots. The fungi provide plants with nutrients like phosphorus, and the plant provides sugars to the fungi. Commensalism. Commensalism is an interaction where one species benefits, and the other species is neither helped nor harmed. The effect on one species is positive, and the effect on the other species is neutral. Effect on species. Beneficiary gains a benefit, e.g., food, shelter, or transportation. Non-beneficiary experiences no significant effect from the relationship. Example. Remoras and sharks. Remoras, small fish, attach themselves to sharks and feed on leftover food scraps from a shark's meals. The remora benefits, while the shark is unaffected. Commensalism. Definition. Commensalism is an interaction where one species is harmed while the other is unaffected. Unlike competition, where both species experience harm, commensalism involves a negative effect on one species without any impact on the other. Effect on species. One species is negatively affected, e.g., harmed or inhibited. Other species experiences no impact from the interaction. Example. Allelopathy. Certain plants, e.g., black walnut trees, release chemicals into the soil that inhibit the growth of nearby plants. The black walnut tree is unaffected, but other plants may suffer reduced growth. Parasitism. Definition. Parasitism is an interaction where one organism, the parasite, benefits at the expense of another organism, the host. The parasite lives on or in the host and obtains nutrients, often harming the host in the process. Effect on species. Parasite gains nutrients and energy from the host, often to the detriment of the host's health. Host suffers a loss in fitness due to the parasite's presence, which can lead to weakened immunity, stunted growth, or death. Example. Ticks in mammals. Ticks are ectoparasites that feed on the blood of mammals, weakening the host and potentially transmitting diseases like Lyme disease. 2. Importance of ecological interactions. Ecological interactions have profound effects on ecosystem structure, biodiversity, and evolution. These interactions help regulate population sizes, influence the distribution of species, and contribute to the maintenance of ecological balance. Regulation of population size. Interactions such as predation and competition can help control the size of populations, ensuring that no single species becomes too dominant and disrupts the balance of the ecosystem. Resource partitioning. In communities with intense competition, species may evolve to use resources in different ways, resource partitioning, reducing direct competition and allowing coexistence. Evolution. Interactions like predation, herbivora, and mutualism drive evolutionary changes by selecting for beneficial traits in species. For instance, herbivores might evolve mechanisms to detoxify plant chemicals, while plants might evolve defenses to deter herbivores. 3. Previous year gave questions on ecological interactions. Q1. Which of the following interactions is characterized by one species benefiting while the other species is neither harmed nor benefited? A. Commensalism. B. Mutualism. C. Parasitism. D. Commensalism. Answer. A. Commensalism. Explanation. Commensalism is an interaction where one species benefits, and the other is unaffected. For example, remoras attach to sharks and feed on scraps without harming the shark. Q2. In which of the following scenarios is a parasitic relationship most evident? A. A bee pollinates a flower while collecting nectar. B. A tapeworm feeds on the intestines of a human. C. Two birds fight over nesting territory. D. A lion hunts and kills a zebra for food. Answer. B. A tapeworm feeds on the intestines of a human. Explanation. Parasitism involves one organism benefiting at the expense of another. A tapeworm living in the human intestine derives nutrients from the host, causing harm to the host. Q3. Which of the following interactions results in a positive effect for both species involved? A. Herbivora. B. Mutualism. C. Competition. D. Predation. Answer. B. Mutualism. Explanation. Mutualism benefits both species. An example is the relationship between bees and flowering plants, where bees obtain nectar and plants are pollinated. Conclusion. Ecological interactions are fundamental to the functioning of ecosystems. Understanding the various types of interactions, competition, predation, herbivora, mutualism, commensalism, amensalism, and parasitism provides insights into how species coexist, evolve, and interact with each other in their environment. These relationships drive ecological processes and are crucial for understanding biodiversity, population dynamics, and ecosystem stability. You said, coevolution. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT company evolution. Coevolution refers to the reciprocal evolutionary changes that occur between two or more species as a result of their interactions with each other. These interactions can be mutualistic, competitive, or antagonistic, and they drive evolutionary adaptations that influence the survival and reproduction of the species involved. Coevolution is a powerful force in shaping the diversity and complexity of life on Earth, as it results in the development of highly specialized traits in organisms that are closely linked to the evolutionary history of other species. 1. Definition and process of coevolution. Coevolution occurs when two or more species exert selective pressures on each other, resulting in evolutionary changes that are interdependent. Over time, these interactions lead to adaptations in one species that influence the evolutionary trajectory of another species, creating a feedback loop of adaptive changes. The process of coevolution typically involves reciprocal selection. Species influence each other through selective pressures, such as competition, predation, or mutualism. This leads to evolutionary changes in traits that improve survival, reproduction, or fitness in response to the interactions. Trait modification. As a result of these selective pressures, species may evolve new behaviors, physical features, or physiological adaptations that enhance their fitness within the context of their relationship with other species. 2. Types of coevolution. Coevolution can occur in several forms depending on the nature of the interaction between the species involved. Some of the key types of coevolution are a mutualistic company evolution. Mutualistic coevolution, both species benefit from the interaction. Over time, both species evolve traits that enhance their mutual survival and reproductive success. Example. Pollination. One of the most well-known examples of mutualistic coevolution is the relationship between flowering plants and their pollinators, e.g., bees, birds. Flowers evolve traits like color, shape, scent, and nectar production to attract specific pollinators, while pollinators evolve traits that allow them to access the nectar and pollen more effectively. This benefits both species. Plants get pollinated, and pollinators obtain food, nectar. B. Antagonistic coevolution. In antagonistic coevolution, one species benefits at the expense of another. This typically occurs in predator-prey, parasite-host, or competitive species relationships. Each species is under selective pressure to evolve strategies that help them outcompete or survive against the other species. Example. Predator-prey coevolution. The relationship between cheetahs predators and gazelles prey is an example of antagonistic coevolution. Cheetahs evolve greater speed and agility to catch prey, while gazelles evolve faster running speeds and evasive maneuvers to escape predation. Over time, both species evolve in response to the strategies of the other, leading to an evolutionary arms race. Host-parasite coevolution. Parasites and their hosts engage in an ongoing coevolutionary arms race. For instance, a parasite might evolve mechanisms to evade the host's immune system, while the host simultaneously evolves better immune responses to combat the parasite. Over time, both species continuously adapt to each other's evolutionary changes. C. Competitive coevolution. Competitive coevolution occurs when two species compete for the same resources, and both evolve strategies to outcompete the other. This often results in niche differentiation, where species evolve to exploit different resources or parts of the environment to reduce direct competition. Example. Interspecific competition. Two species of birds might evolve to specialize in different feeding behaviors, e.g., one species may evolve to feed on seeds, while the other specializes in eating insects, thus reducing direct competition for food. Over time, these evolutionary changes can lead to distinct ecological niches for the species involved. 3. Mechanisms of coevolution. Coevolution can result from several mechanisms that act to influence the relationship between species. These mechanisms include a natural selection. Natural selection plays a central role in coevolution. When species interact, those with traits that provide a fitness advantage, such as better defense mechanisms, more efficient feeding strategies, or improved communication, are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing those advantageous traits on to the next generation. B. Genetic drift. Genetic drift can also play a role in coevolution by causing random changes in allele frequencies in small populations, which might lead to new traits that influence the interaction between species. This mechanism may result in the divergence of species over time. C. Gene flow. Gene flow occurs when individuals from different populations interbreed, leading to the exchange of genetic material. In the case of coevolution, gene flow between populations can spread advantageous traits that improve the interaction between species. D. Co-adaptation. Co-adaptation occurs when two species evolve in response to each other's evolutionary changes, often resulting in a high degree of specialization. This process can lead to an evolutionary lockstep, where both species continuously adapt to each other in a mutualistic or antagonistic manner. 4. Examples of coevolution. A. Flowers and pollinators. Example. The relationship between hummingbirds and tubular flowers is a prime example of mutualistic coevolution. Hummingbirds have evolved long beaks and hovering flight capabilities to extract nectar from flowers, while the flowers have evolved to produce nectar at the base of their tubular petals, encouraging the birds to visit and pollinate them. B. Predator and prey. Example. The cheetah and gazelle are often cited as examples of antagonistic coevolution. Cheetahs have evolved to be incredibly fast runners to catch prey, while gazelles have evolved agility and speed to avoid predators. C. Herbivores and plants. Example. Plants and herbivores engage in coevolutionary relationships. For instance, some plants produce chemical compounds as a defense mechanism against herbivora. In response, herbivores might evolve the ability to detoxify these chemicals or develop resistance to their effects. One example is the evolution of detoxifying enzymes in caterpillars that feed on toxic plants. D. Hosts and parasites. Example. The relationship between malaria parasites and their human hosts is a classic example of coevolution. The malaria parasite Plasmodium has evolved mechanisms to evade the human immune system, while humans have evolved genetic traits, e.g., sickle cell anemia, that provide some resistance to malaria. 5. Importance of coevolution. Coevolution is significant for several reasons. Biodiversity. Coevolution drives species diversification and the development of complex ecological relationships. It can lead to the emergence of new species and novel traits that contribute to biodiversity. Ecosystem functioning. Coevolution affects the stability and functioning of ecosystems by shaping species interactions and community dynamics. Speciation. Coevolutionary pressures can contribute to speciation by causing genetic divergence between populations, leading to the formation of new species. Adaptation and survival. Species engaged in coevolutionary interactions often experience strong selective pressures that result in the development of specialized traits and behaviors that increase their chances of survival and reproduction. 6. Previous year gave questions on coevolution. Q1. Which of the following is an example of mutualistic coevolution? A. Predator-prey interactions. B. Competition for resources. C. Pollination by bees in flowers. D. Herbivora by grazing animals. Answer. C. Pollination by bees in flowers. Explanation. Pollination involves a mutualistic relationship between bees, which benefit from nectar, and flowers, which benefit from pollination. Q2. Co-evolutionary interaction between a predator and its prey. What is the primary evolutionary result for both species? A. Stabilization of species population sizes. B. Evolution of better defense mechanisms in prey and improved predation strategies in the predator. C. No change in the gene pool of either species. D. Diversification into completely unrelated species. Answer. B. Evolution of better defense mechanisms in prey and improved predation strategies in the predator. Explanation. In predator-prey interactions, both species evolve traits that improve their chances of survival or feeding, leading to an evolutionary arms race. Conclusion. Coevolution is a crucial aspect of evolutionary biology that drives the diversification of species and shapes the dynamics of ecological communities. The reciprocal evolutionary pressures between species result in the development of specialized traits, behaviors, and adaptations that influence survival, reproduction, and fitness. Whether in mutualistic, antagonistic, or competitive interactions, coevolution plays a central role in the evolutionary process and in shaping the intricate relationships between species and ecosystems. You said, co-adaptations. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Co-adaptation and company evolution. Co-adaptation refers to the process through which two or more species or populations evolve traits in response to the selective pressures exerted by each other. Over time, these adaptations become interdependent, as each species adjusts to the evolutionary changes of the other species. Co-adaptation is an integral part of coevolution, and it often results in highly specialized traits that enhance the survival and reproductive success of the interacting species. 1. Definition of co-adaptation. Coadaptation occurs when two species, which have been in long-term evolutionary interactions through competition, mutualism, predation, or parasitism, evolve traits that are directly or indirectly beneficial in response to the other. These traits are co-adapted, meaning that the adaptation in one species is closely tied to the evolutionary changes in the other. These traits might be physical characteristics, behaviors, or physiological processes that improve the organism's fitness within the context of their relationship. Co-adaptation is a natural consequence of reciprocal selection pressures, where one species' evolutionary success is often contingent upon the evolutionary changes occurring in the other. Over time, these traits become so specialized that both species' fitness is maximized by the specific nature of their interdependent evolutionary adaptations. 2. Types of co-adaptations. There are different types of co-adaptations based on the nature of the relationship between the species involved. Some of the main types of co-adaptations include a mutualistic company adaptation. In mutualistic interactions, both species benefit from the relationship. Over time, both species evolve traits that optimize their mutual benefits. Example. Pollination. Flowers and their pollinators, e.g., bees, exhibit co-adaptation. Bees have evolved structures such as long proboscises that enable them to access nectar deep inside flowers. In return, flowers have evolved to produce nectar as a food reward, attracting the bees and ensuring pollination. Over time, flower shapes, colors, and scent profiles have adapted to suit the morphology and behavior of the pollinator species. Mycorrhizal fungi in plants. In this mutualistic relationship, mycorrhizal fungi colonize plant roots, aiding in nutrient and water uptake for the plant. The plant, in turn, provides sugars and carbon to the fungus. Both organisms have co-adapted to optimize this nutrient exchange. Plants have evolved more efficient root systems, and fungi have evolved specialized structures that increase nutrient absorption. B. Antagonistic co-adaptation. In antagonistic relationships, such as those between predators and prey, or parasites and hosts, one species benefits at the expense of the other. Co-adaptations in these interactions typically result from an arms race, where each species continually evolves to counter the other's adaptations. Example. Predator-prey arms race. The cheetah-predator and the gazelle-prey provide an example of antagonistic co-adaptation. Cheetahs have evolved extreme speed and agility to catch prey, while gazelles have evolved countermeasures such as erratic running patterns and quick turns to avoid capture. Each species' adaptations depend on the others, and this dynamic pushes both species to evolve increasingly specialized traits. Host-parasite co-adaptation. Parasites and their hosts engage in a co-adaptation process. For example, the malaria parasite Plasmodium has evolved mechanisms to avoid the human immune system, while humans have evolved genetic resistance, such as the sickle cell trait, which provides some protection against malaria. The continuous evolutionary battle between the two leads to increasingly specialized adaptations on both sides. See competitive co-adaptation. In competitive co-adaptation, species that are competing for the same resources evolve traits that allow them to better exploit those resources. Over time, this may lead to niche differentiation, where each species adapts to occupy slightly different ecological niches, thereby reducing direct competition. Example. Plant competition for light. In a dense forest, plants must compete for sunlight. Some species evolve taller stems to reach more light, while others develop strategies such as growing faster or utilizing shaded areas. These adaptations are codependent on the competitive pressures exerted by other species in the same environment. 3. Mechanisms of co-adaptation. Co-adaptation generally occurs through several evolutionary mechanisms that act to promote the reciprocal adaptation of species. These include a natural selection. Natural selection plays a fundamental role in co-adaptation, as organisms with traits that confer a survival or reproductive advantage in the context of their interactions with other species are more likely to pass those traits to the next generation. For instance, flowers that are better suited to attract pollinators will tend to have higher reproductive success, leading to further refinement of traits in both flowers and pollinators. B. Genetic drift. In some cases, co-adaptation can be influenced by genetic drift, especially in small populations. This random fluctuation in allele frequencies can lead to the fixation of specific traits that, while not always adaptive in a broader sense, contribute to the interdependent relationship between species. See gene flow. Gene flow can enhance co-adaptation by facilitating the spread of beneficial traits between populations of interacting species. In species that are geographically close to each other and engage in frequent interactions, gene flow can introduce new genetic material that drives co-evolutionary changes. D. Co-speciation. Co-speciation is a form of co-adaptation that occurs when two species diverge in response to one another over time. As one species adapts to changes in the other, both species may undergo parallel evolutionary changes. A classic example of this is the co-speciation between parasites and their hosts, where both evolve in response to each other's genetic changes. 4. Examples of co-adaptation of hummingbirds and flowers. Hummingbirds and certain flowers exhibit co-adaptation through their specialized traits. Hummingbirds have long, slender beaks that fit perfectly into tubular flowers, while these flowers have evolved to produce nectar at the base of their long, narrow petals, encouraging the birds to visit for pollination. This mutualistic co-adaptation benefits both species. The birds obtain food while pollinating the flowers, and the flowers ensure their reproductive success. B. Mantis shrimp and their prey. Mantis shrimps are famous for their powerful strike, which they use to capture prey like crabs and mollusks. Over time, their prey species have evolved stronger shells or behaviors to evade mantis shrimp attacks. This reciprocal adaptation, where both predator and prey continue to evolve in response to each other's traits, represents a form of co-adaptation in an antagonistic context. See cheating and counter-cheating in parasites. Some parasitic wasps have evolved to lay their eggs in the nests of other species. In response, the host species has evolved the ability to detect and reject foreign eggs. Parasites, in turn, evolve better mechanisms to hide or disguise their eggs. This continual cycle of adaptive changes between the parasitic wasp and its host species is a classic example of co-adaptation. 5. Importance of co-adaptation. Co-adaptation plays a significant role in evolutionary processes and the development of biodiversity. The importance of co-adaptation can be summarized in several key points. Enhancement of survival. Co-adaptations often enhance the survival and reproductive success of species in the context of their interactions, whether they are mutualistic or antagonistic. Niche differentiation. In competitive co-adaptation, species may evolve in such a way that they reduce direct competition by occupying different ecological niches, thereby promoting biodiversity. Evolutionary, arms race. In antagonistic interactions, co-adaptation often leads to an evolutionary arms race, where species continuously evolve new strategies to outcompete or outlast their competitors or predators. Speciation. Co-adaptation may also contribute to speciation by promoting reproductive isolation between populations, especially in the case of co-speciation and host-parasite relationships. 6. Previous year gave questions on co-adaptation Q1. Co-adaptation refers to the process where two species evolve, independent of each other. B. Traits in response to each other's evolutionary pressure. C. To become completely different species. D. To survive without interacting. Answer. B. Traits in response to each other's evolutionary pressures. Explanation. Co-adaptation occurs when species evolve traits in response to the evolutionary changes of another species, typically through mutualistic or antagonistic interactions. Q2. In the context of co-adaptation, the evolutionary arms race typically occurs between a mutualistic species. B. Predator and prey. C. Different ecological niches. D. Unrelated species. Answer. B. Predator and prey. Explanation. The arms race in co-adaptation often occurs between predator and prey, where both species continuously evolve in response to each other's strategies. Conclusion. Co-adaptation is a critical concept in evolutionary biology, emphasizing the interdependence of species' evolutionary trajectories due to their interactions. Through reciprocal selective pressures, species evolve specialized traits that enhance their fitness in the context of these relationships. Whether in mutualistic, antagonistic, or competitive settings, co-adaptation shapes the dynamics of ecosystems and contributes to the rich diversity of life on Earth. You said, arms race. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Arms race in evolutionary biology. An arms race in evolutionary biology refers to a situation where two or more species engage in a cycle of reciprocal adaptations, typically as a result of an antagonistic relationship. This race is metaphorical, drawing parallels to military arms races, where opposing sides develop progressively advanced weapons to outcompete each other. In the context of evolution, arms races occur between species like predators and prey, parasites and hosts, or competitors for limited resources. The adaptations in one species drive adaptive changes in the other, leading to an ongoing cycle of evolutionary innovations and counter-innovations. 1. Definition of arms race in evolution. An evolutionary arms race refers to the constant, reciprocal evolutionary adaptations between species that are in antagonistic interactions, such as predator-prey or host-parasite relationships. Each species evolves new traits or behaviors to counter the adaptations of the other. Over time, these adaptations may become more sophisticated, leading to an escalating arms race between the two species. The process is driven by natural selection, where individuals with traits that improve their survival and reproductive success are more likely to pass on their genes to future generations. An arms race is typically characterized by a cycle in which one species develops a new adaptation, e.g., better camouflage, faster speed, or more potent toxins, which is then countered by an adaptation in the other species, e.g., enhanced detection, improved evasion, or resistance. This process can continue for many generations, creating an escalating race in evolutionary traits. 2. Types of evolutionary arms race is a predator-prey arms race. In predator-prey interactions, one species, the predator, evolves traits that enhance its ability to capture and consume the prey, while the prey species simultaneously evolves counter-adaptations to avoid predation. The arms race between predators and prey leads to the development of sophisticated adaptations in both groups. Example. Cheetah and gazelle. The cheetah, a predator, has evolved extreme speed and agility to catch prey. In response, the gazelle has developed the ability to make rapid, unpredictable turns while running, making it harder for the cheetah to catch it. Over time, this results in a co-evolutionary arms race, where both species continuously evolve faster speeds and more refined evasion tactics. B. Host-parasite arms race. In parasitic relationships, the parasite evolves traits that increase its ability to exploit the host, while the host evolves countermeasures to resist parasitism. This leads to an arms race between the parasite and its host, with both species constantly evolving new strategies to gain the upper hand. Example. Malaria parasite in humans. The malaria parasite Plasmodium has developed mechanisms to evade the host immune system. In response, humans have evolved genetic resistances, such as the sickle cell trait, which offers protection against malaria. However, the parasite continues to evolve, resulting in a continuing arms race between host immune responses and parasite survival strategies. See competitive arms race. An arms race can also occur between two or more species competing for the same limited resources. In this case, the competing species evolve traits that allow them to outcompete each other for those resources, leading to a cycle of adaptations. Example. Plants competing for sunlight. In dense forests, plants must compete for light. Some plants evolve taller stems to reach more sunlight, while others may evolve larger leaves to maximize photosynthesis in shaded areas. These competing traits lead to an arms race, where each species develops new adaptations to better compete for light. 3. Mechanisms driving arms races. Arms races are primarily driven by natural selection, where adaptations that enhance survival and reproductive success in the context of antagonistic interactions are favored. The key mechanisms driving evolutionary arms races include a reciprocal selection pressure. In an arms race, one species' evolutionary changes exert selection pressure on the other species, and vice versa. For example, when a predator develops a new method of capturing prey, the prey species may face an increased risk of predation, creating selective pressure for them to evolve better defenses or evasive tactics. B. Genetic variation. For an arms race to occur, there must be genetic variation in the population for traits related to the antagonistic interaction. Individuals with advantageous traits are more likely to survive and reproduce, passing on these traits to the next generation. This variation is the raw material for natural selection to act upon. C. Adaptation and counter-adaptation. Each evolutionary step in the arms race involves an adaptation by one species that is then countered by the other species. For example, if a parasite evolves a new way to infect its host, the host may evolve an immune response that neutralizes the parasite. This counter-adaptation leads to another round of evolution in both species. 4. Examples of evolutionary arms races are cheating and counter-cheating in parasites and hosts. In many host-parasite relationships, the parasite evolves mechanisms to exploit the host, e.g., by avoiding detection by the host's immune system, while the host evolves countermeasures, e.g., enhanced immune responses. This results in an ongoing cycle of cheating and counter-cheating, where each species continually evolves new strategies to overcome the other's defenses. B. Snakes and newts toxicity arms race. The evolutionary arms race between certain species of snakes and newts is a famous example. Some newts, e.g., the rough-skinned newt, have evolved potent toxins as a defense against predators. In turn, certain species of garter snakes have developed resistance to these toxins, allowing them to feed on the newts. The newts, in response, have evolved even more potent toxins, while the snakes continue to evolve increased resistance. This escalating interaction exemplifies the arms race concept. 5. Key features of an evolutionary arms race. Escalation. Both species continually evolve new adaptations in response to each other's